Well, welcome to the latest MS Here from the Experts webinar. This webinars help people better understanding multiple sclerosis, highlights MS-related resources, plus provides tools and tips to navigate their MS journey with more knowledge and confidence. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Brent Mandel. I was diagnosed with relapse remitting MS in 2021. In 2022, I became a committee member, as you can see, for the MS Walk, and it changed my entire outlook on my MS. I have continued my MS volunteer journey and am now a proud facilitator for the Men's National MS Group, which meets every last Wednesday of the month and is done virtually. I am also involved in various other volunteer roles across MS Canada. I will now pass it on to Terry to share a little bit about himself.
What's going on, everyone? I'm Terry Cashram. I'm the other moderator for today's webinar, and I also facilitate the Men's National Multiple Sclerosis Group, the first male support group from MS Canada. I was diagnosed with relapse remitting MS back in 2008, and I've been involved with MS Canada ever since. I'm also a full-time wheelchair user, and I'm excited to be here with all of you guys today. Now I'm going to deliver the land acknowledgements. MS Canada would like to acknowledge that we are on the unceded and ancestral territory of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people across Canada. These nations have cared for this land from the oceans to the mountain peaks for thousands of years and continue to do so today. We thank them for their continuous care and for their opportunity to host this session today. At MS Canada, we are committed to learning from and working with Indigenous people to care for the land we all call home.
Perfect. Thank you, Terry. So before we get started with our presentations, let's briefly go over a couple of housekeeping items. First off, your microphones have been muted. If you have a question, please type it into the chat box and we will try to get to as many questions as possible following the presentations. We kindly ask that your questions be general in nature so that everyone can benefit from the discussion. If your question is personal or specific to your own situation, we recommend following up directly with your healthcare team or our MS Knowledge Network. This session is also being recorded and will be available soon on our website from the informative videos on MS page. A Facebook Live recording will be available also. Please note that MS Canada does not approve, endorse, or recommend any specific product, therapy, or service, but instead provides information to assist individuals in making their own health and wellness decisions. Plus, the views and opinions expressed in the presentation are those of the speakers and may not necessarily reflect the views or positions of MS Canada.
Okay, since 1948, we at MS Canada have been proud to be a part of a community of people living with MS, their families, friends, plus volunteers, donors, researchers, clinicians, and many more. Together, we have helped fund research, provide information, and support to people affected by MS. And we've taken a bold stance to advocate for changes that allow people living with MS to live full and inclusive lives. Our current strategic plan not only lays out the roadmap in our journey to create a world free of MS, but we hope it also provides inspiration for all in the MS community to connect and collaborate. So together we can advance treatments and care, enhance well-being, understand and halt disease progression, and prevent MS from happening. Please note that during this broadcast, a couple of pop-up polls will appear. We ask that you respond to each. The anonymous information will help MS Canada better understand your experience and the impact we are having on the MS community.
Perfect. Thank you, Terry. So, the first of today's experts is Bonnie Blaine. She is a registered nurse specializing in multiple sclerosis. She works at the Central Alberta MS Clinic in Red Deer with extensive experience in patient care, education, and clinical leadership. Bonnie currently serves as president of the International Organization of MS Nurses, IOMSN, where she is dedicated to advancing MS nursing and supporting nurses worldwide, and serves as co-chair of the MS Canada Nursing Advisory Group, which promotes leadership and excellence in MS nursing across the country. Welcome, Bonnie.
Well, welcome everyone. I first really want to thank MS Canada for inviting me to speak about this very important subject. And we're going to talk about men's health and MS. And I'm also very excited to hear Dr. Rankachary's presentation as well. His research helps us to understand why MS may be different for men, and his findings support research for new treatment options as well as give hope for new therapies for MS. So, MS can affect men differently, and sometimes those differences aren't discussed openly. So we're going to look at some of those challenges and some of the differences that happen, along with some strategy, and most importantly, be able to provide a bit of hope. So one time, a long time ago, I did a presentation on MS, and when I was all done, someone in the back stood up and said, "Could you tell me what MS is?" And so on that day, I really realized that we have to start at the beginning all of the time. So MS is a condition where the immune system attacks the brain and spinal cord, and it damages myelin. Myelin is a protective coating that coats the nerves in the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord. And when it's damaged, this really slows down the signals between the brain and the body. And the symptoms can vary widely, and no two journeys are the same. So for many years, we used to describe MS as having different types or stages: relapsing, remitting, secondary progressive, primary progressive. And it really helped us to understand how the disease appeared to change over time. Now, research suggests that rather than being a completely separate type, with separate types, MS is one disease that involves two overlapping components: neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. And these processes occur in varying degrees right from the very beginning. So neuroinflammation is where the immune system attacks myelin, and this causes relapse. And neurodegeneration is nerve cell loss and gradual progression. So these two processes happen together, just in different proportions for each person. And that's why early and ongoing treatment is important to reduce inflammation early and to slow long-term neurodegeneration. So while we still use terms like relapsing, remitting, primary progressive to guide our care, we really now recognize that MS is one continuous disease with different patterns of inflammation and repair. And this understanding really helps us to treat it more proactively and precisely right from the start. Next slide. Over the past 2 decades, we've seen remarkable progress in MS treatment. What used to be a disease with limited options is now a very treatable disease with more than 25 approved therapies available. We have pills, injections, and infusions. And the key message for patients is that treatment should be personalized. Each person's MS behaves differently, and so working closely with your neurologist and your MS nurse to find the right therapy and then staying consistent with it makes a difference. Early and ongoing treatment helps to reduce inflammation, protect nerve cells, and preserve brain and spinal cord function. And really, it's not about finding the perfect therapy, it's finding one that works both for you and for your neurologist. So your neurologist wants one that's effective, and we need you to have one that it fits with your life and can stick with it. And so this is a very shared decision-making process. Next slide. Over the past 2 decades, we've seen remarkable, try next slide. Okay. So even with effective disease-modifying therapy, people will still notice that they have some ongoing symptoms that can impact their daily lives. So things like fatigue, pain, spasticity, bowel or bladder problems, sometimes mood fluctuations, and heat intolerance. So it's important to know that these symptoms are common and manageable. And MS care is not really just about preventing relapses. It's also about improving quality of life and helping you to stay active and engaged in the things that really matter the most. So managing symptoms often takes a team approach. We have physiotherapists and occupational therapists that can help with mobility, energy conservation, and adapting to home or work. And we also have social workers who help people with accommodations, with funding, with forms, and sometimes some brief solution-focused counseling. Mental health support, counseling, peer support, mindfulness can also make a big difference. And common other referrals that we make, because our goal really is to have the right person helping you at the right time. And so we often will make referrals to urology, psychiatry, psychology, sometimes dietitians, sometimes speech and language pathologists. And so when you live in a large urban center, often these resources are available. But when you live more in a rural setting, it can be harder and harder to find these things. And so it's important to advocate for yourself. Speak up with your family doctor and let him know. Or you can also use the navigators on the MS Canada website, and they are often very helpful to help you navigate the things that you need. And it's really very good to open up and talk about the things that you're noticing, even kind of if they feel a bit minor. So small adjustments like pacing, your activities, improving sleep, or addressing mood early can have a major impact over time. And again, the goal is really to live well with MS, not just to treat it. Next slide. When we talk about relapses, we mean new or significantly worsening symptoms that last longer than 24 hours and aren't caused by something like heat, infection, or fatigue. Relapses can be unsettling, but they are a known part of MS for many people, and it doesn't necessarily mean that your treatment is not working, but it is important to let your MS clinic or your neurologist know as soon as you notice a significant change. We usually treat relapses with a short course of high-dose corticosteroids, either through IV or through pills for 3 to 5 days. And the goal of the steroids is not to change the long-term course of MS, like a disease-modifying therapy, but more to reduce inflammation quickly and help your body recover faster. And it's important to know that not all relapses are treated with steroids. Sometimes we just let time also do it. Steroids are conserved more for relapses that have some disability that is affecting your daily life. So that's kind of the beginning. And I know that most of you know probably about all of this stuff anyway, but it's important to go through it. And so let's talk now about, next slide, please. Let's talk more about how MS affects men differently. So we know that MS affects women more often. About 3 times more women are diagnosed than men. But when men do develop MS, research shows that it often behaves a bit differently. So first, men are often diagnosed later. And sometimes this happens because men tend to minimize their symptoms or brush it off a little bit or wait to see if they improve on their own. Other times it's because MS is still thought of as a woman's disease, so subtle symptoms might not be recognized as quickly. Second, men are more likely to have primary progressive MS, which tends to cause gradual worsening right from the start rather than clear relapses and remissions. So this doesn't mean that it's untreatable. It just means it can look different and may need a different treatment approach. Third, studies show that men may experience a faster rate of disability progression or more cognitive changes, things like slowed information processing, maybe some memory lapses or changes in concentration. And these changes are connected to how inflammation and nerve loss affect the brain over time. It's not really a reflection of intelligence or motivation. And then beyond biology, social factors can also play a big role. Men can feel pressure to appear strong or independent, which can make it harder to ask for help or to talk about fatigue, mood, or sexual changes. The good news is that we now understand these differences much better, and that earlier diagnosis, consistent treatment, and proactive symptom management can help a lot. The goal for men is the same as women living with MS, to stay active, connected, and as confident as possible. And the first step is really recognizing that seeking help is not weakness, it's really about taking control of your own health. Next slide. Many of the symptoms that men experience with MS are the same as those seen in women. Things like numbness, weakness, tingling, balance problems, and changes in vision. But research shows us that some patterns can differ. Men often report more issues with coordination and balance, more noticeable muscle stiffness or weakness, and sometimes more cognitive changes like slower thinking or short-term memory lapses. And this can be subtle at first, but they can really affect confidence or independence at work or home. Another important area is sexuality and intimacy. Some men notice changes in libido or erectile function, and that's something that we want to normalize talking about. These changes are caused by nerve and vascular changes from MS. They are not about masculinity or desire. Fatigue, mood changes, and anxiety are also common and can compound physical symptoms. The key message here is that the symptoms are manageable. With the right course of medications, therapy, lifestyle changes, and open communication, men stay active, connected, and engaged in their most important things. Next slide. So many men feel pressure to appear strong, or think that MS is a woman's disease, and this really can lead to delaying medical attention. But awareness is key, and the sooner that we recognize the symptoms, sooner treatment can begin, and really the better the outcomes. Next slide. It's really important for men to know that the challenges with balance, coordination, or thinking are common in MS, and they're not a sign of weakness. And these symptoms can be frustrating, especially if you're used to being independent or active, but they are a part of how MS affects the brain and the spinal cord. And this is really where our allied health team comes in to become so valuable. Working with physio can help to rebuild balance and core strength, and an occupational therapist can suggest ways to make daily activities safer and easier and help you to adapt to routines. And then we have neuropsychology or cognitive rehab that can help strengthen your focus through brain training. Next slide. When we look at the research, we see a pattern of MS symptoms as we see a pattern. As MS symptoms increase, men sometimes experience a bigger drop in their emotional well-being or confidence than women do. And this doesn't mean that men cope worse. It means that MS affects the brain differently for everyone, and men might feel those changes more strongly in certain areas. We also have to consider the social side. Many men were raised to be strong, independent, and self-reliant, and that can make it harder to talk about fatigue, fear, mood, stress, sexuality, or identity changes. And to be honest, healthcare providers don't always bring these topics up either, which often makes men feel alone. When I share this information, my goal is not to label men. It's really to say, if you're struggling, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not weak. You're human, and these are normal, treatable parts of MS. We want men to know that mental health support, counseling, peer connection, exercise, and family conversations can be just as important as medication. So when we talk openly about mental well-being, men get better support, they have better outcomes, and they feel more in control. And that's the whole goal. A great place to start would be with the MS Canada Navigators. These are available on their website. When you open it up, you get a little pop-up talks about, and they have also a men's support group, which I think our moderators spoke about. Next slide. So let's talk about sexual health. It is such an important subject, but it's often overlooked. Part of living well with MS is a good sexual health. And when we talk about sexual health, we mean the physical aspects of this, like erectile function, sensation, libido, and sexual response. And MS can affect those areas because of nerve damage, changes in blood flow, fatigue, medications, or even mood. And for a man, this can be especially difficult to discuss because it touches on their identity, confidence, and their self-worth. Intimacy, on the other hand, is broader. It's about closeness, connection, and feeling emotionally and physically close to their partner. Even when sexual function changes, intimacy can still grow through communication, humor, touch, trust, and patience. It's completely normal for this topic to feel uncomfortable. Many men were never encouraged to talk openly about their sexual health, and healthcare providers sometimes struggle to bring it up too. It's either because of time, uncertainty, or their own personal discomfort. But avoiding the topic can make people feel isolated, when in reality, these challenges are very common and very treatable. Men really should talk with their healthcare team, either their nurse or their neurologist or a family doctor, about the changes in their sexual functioning and intimacy. There are some medication, counseling, supports, and strategies that can make a difference. So sexual health is not just about performance. It's about connection, communication, and quality of life. And honestly, if you were to see a healthcare provider, and I think all you would have to say is, I'm having trouble with my sex life, that should open up a full conversation about sexual health. So it's probably something that they just did not feel comfortable bringing up themselves, or it got lost in the whole communication. So when we talk about health, there are really two important sides. There's brain health and then wellness. And brain health means treatment, monitoring, keeping your mind active, and controlling risks. Wellness means staying physically active, caring for mental health, and the whole body, including other diseases or risks you might have, like heart disease and diabetes. It's important to have a regular checkup with your family doctor or your nurse practitioner, and it's important to build relationships that find meaning. And, you know, things like smoking cessation and eating well, exercise regularly, taking some vitamin D, and really just keeping your mind and your body active. So both brain health and wellness matter. Next slide. The message on this slide really is about hope. Early diagnosis helps, treatment slows progression, and support improves the quality of life. Men report that when they see real improvements after opening up about their challenges. So advocacy, or speaking up for yourself, is super important. So I'd like to talk about Robert. This is not his real name, but he is a man who represents many real men that I've met in clinic. Robert is 42. He's a mechanic, a husband, and a father of 2 teenagers. When he first noticed some tingling in his fingers and some trouble keeping his balance at work, he kind of brushed it off. Like many men, he thought that it was just part of maybe getting older, or stress, fatigue, working long hours. But when his hand weakness suddenly worsened, he finally went to his doctor. And they sent him off to see a neurologist. And after some testing and an MRI, he was diagnosed with MS. And the news hit him really hard. He was worried about his job, he was worried about his family, and whether life as he knew it was kind of over. At first, he tried to kind of push through on his own. But he soon realized that managing MS requires teamwork. And so he started on a disease-modifying therapy, and he learned about the importance of staying consistent with it. And his nurse gave him a lot of education about the disease and how the processes that happen, and helped him to understand side effects and how to fit the treatment into his life. He connected with an MS Canada navigator on their website who provided more information and support, and connected him to the men's support group. So through physio and occupational therapy, he learned to pace himself, to plan his days so that he didn't burn out. And he added some short stretching routines, learned some safer ways to lift and move, and began walking regularly with his wife. He also opened up about sexual health and intimacy, a conversation he truly never thought that he'd have to have with a healthcare provider. But by talking honestly, he discovered that there were some options and supports that helped him and his partner reconnect. And over time, Robert found his rhythm again. He still has MS, but he also has control, knowledge, and support. And he knows how to adjust his sails, not just to sort of fight the wind, but more to move with it. His story really reminds men that with MS that living well is not about being perfect or about doing it alone. It's about staying engaged, asking for help, and working with a team to help keep moving forward. So MS is the wind that we cannot control. Adjusting sails adjusting, we can adjust our sails. So that means that treatment, lifestyle choices, support, and asking for help is important. Robert learned that he couldn't control MS itself, but he could set his sails with purpose, and so can other men. So many men face unique challenges in MS, but early action and support really help. Caring for your whole health, emotional, physical, sexual, makes a difference. And remember, you're not alone. Reaching out is strength. Here are some great resources from MS Canada and the National MS Society. And I did add in one other article that I thought was quite helpful when I was making this presentation. These are the references and resources that I used when I was preparing for this talk. And finally, I really want to thank you for your attention. And I believe there might be some time afterwards if you have any questions. So thank you.
First of all, Bonnie, thank you so much. Really appreciate your informative presentation. Today's second expert presenter is Dr. Manu Rangachari. He has a long-standing interest in T-cell-driven autoimmune mechanisms. In particular, he studies the role of immune checkpoint molecules in reducing T-cell inflammation in mouse models of MS. He currently is a professor of medicine at University Laval with a research program focused on the role of the adaptive immune system in progressive MS.
Okay. Thank you very much for the introduction. Thank you, Terry and Brett, for moderating. Bonnie, for this very engaging presentation at the start, and also to Lori for the invitation. So I'm going to talk to you today. I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll try and make this engaging. About work that's being done in my lab in Quebec City about sex differences and how they can drive differences in immune system function in progressive MS. So these are my disclosures. So as Bonnie has already mentioned, women are at a higher risk in developing relapse onset MS, with about 3 women developing relapse onset MS relative to every man. But again, so men with multiple sclerosis often have a worse prognosis than women and are more prone to developing progressive forms. So what I work on is the immune system. So this is it's just a bit of a very complicated slide here, I understand, but the basic philosophy or the basic understanding of particularly relapse onset MS is if you start, I believe, at the left of the slide, you get immune cells in the spleen, the lymph nodes, and blood that then get activated. They cross the blood-brain barrier that separates the blood vessels from the brain itself, and inside there they get reactivated again, and then cause damage to brain and spinal cord tissue. And you may have neurons are a cell type that many of you know of. Many of you will have heard of oligodendrocytes because they're the source of myelin. And so these are some of the targets of immune damage in multiple sclerosis. So I'm going to talk to you today specifically about a type of cell called the Th17 cell. The reason I want to show this more complicated slide is just so you don't think that what I work on is the only cell type involved. It's just that in research, you focus on one small piece of the puzzle and then hope to work with researchers around Canada and also around the world to help understand this disease. Also, a much more simple thing, and actually I just found this today. I'm on sabbatical at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, and I came across this slide that I get some school kids to put this together and to put this up. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to be great for my talk. So this is, I guess, some school kids that have done and made a project on what is the immune system. And basically what we are focusing on is this part here, which are these T cells that are attacking a cell that expresses a specific antigen. So let me to also just kind of give a different analogy, something you might that's been on our minds a lot recently, I guess, in Canada. So the CD4 T cell, I like to think of it a lot like Kevin Gosman here. He's the ace of the CD4 T cell is the ace of the immune system. So it's also known in the literature as the helper T cell. The helper T cell will respond to short bits of protein. T cells in general, to short bits of protein that are between 13 and 25 amino acids in length. So if you remember back to high school biology, an amino acid is the composition of a protein. These are very, very short bits of protein. And each T cell, it's a very exquisite lock and key mechanism. Each T cell, in theory, recognizes only this one specific type of antigen. And so the CD4 T cell itself has very few quote unquote effector functions of its own. What we mean by that in immunology is that, or as an immune biologist, is that CD4 T cells don't really go and kill or attack cells themselves. Rather, they coordinate the response of other immune cells, such as B cells, macrophages, neutrophils, or CD8 positive T cells, bringing them to sites of inflammation, as is the case in multiple sclerosis. And it's these other cells that really cause the damage. But the CD4 T cells are crucial because, again, they're the ace of the immune system. They sort of direct everything else. And in multiple sclerosis, they're typically responding to antigens that are derived from the brain and spinal cord, the CNS, the central nervous system, that are typically derived again from myelin, which I think many of you have heard of, which is the fatty insulation that coats our nerves. And so many multiple sclerosis treatments are target the CD4 positive T cells, but they're far, and I tried to show that in my earlier slide, they're far from being the only player that's important in multiple sclerosis. So when I talk about CD4 T helper cell fate, it's something I'm going to be talking about quite a bit today. I want to give you an idea what that means. And so this is sort of this kind of Price is Right board here. We have this one cell here that it gets activated by what's called this sort of a brown blob over here is what's called an antigen presenting cell. It's a very specific type of cell that presents those really short bits of protein to the T cell in the lock and key mechanism that I explained earlier. That's crucial to the T cell being activated and dividing and making many, many more cells. But another thing that happens is there's another signal called a cytokine, which is a fancy word for saying a protein that gets pumped out of cells and exists in the plasma, exists in the blood, and can act on other cells. And so this one example here is a molecule called interleukin 12. And this results in a cell type. It's a TH cell. It's a T helper 1 cell, but it's called TH1. It's a very specific type of cell. And this creates another cytokine, another soluble protein that tends to come from a cell called interferon gamma. And this causes, I mentioned before, that the T helper cells are bringing other cells to the sites of infection or inflammation. In this case, this brings macrophages and CD8 positive T cells. Now, the topic of what I'm going to talk about today is a different type of cell that's identical. It's also seeing its antigen, its short protein on an antigen presenting cell. But here it sees a different cocktail of cytokines, these soluble proteins that come from the antigen presenting cell. So it's not important to remember what these are. There won't be a test on this later. It's just to tell you that these are different. And this results in a T helper 17 response that is driven, as its name suggests, that's named after the fact that these cells produce a signal called interleukin 17. And these bring another cell type called neutrophils to sites of infection and inflammation. So why is it that I care so much about Th17 cells? And so the reason is that they are pretty strongly associated with progressive forms of MS. So this is there's evidence here, and there's some of the original literatures at the bottom if you're curious. If you have a biology background, you want to look into this. But Th17 cells, they're found in the blood and in spinal taps of people with progressive MS. And proteins that are produced by Th17 cells are increased in the plasma of people with MS. And finally, and this is actually, I like to bring this up because this work is actually really famous work. This was done at the University of Toronto. So it's a Canadian study from Dr. Jennifer Gomerman. And her lab used a mouse model of progressive MS. And they found that Th17 cells are essential for the mice to get sick in this progressive model. And so this is linking T helper 17 cells to progressive MS. So just in the interest of time, I'm going to have to skip over what the various train of thought that brought us to on looking at Th17 cells in sex differences. But our basic question is, how does biological sex affect T cell driven outcomes in progressive multiple sclerosis? And we use what's called the EAE model to study chronic progressive MS mechanisms. So never fear, I will explain what EAE means. It stands for this very long, you'll see why I have to abbreviate it. It's this very, very long named experimental autoimmune encephalomyelitis, which basically is an umbrella term. It's a global term that's used for different animal models of autoimmunity or immune attack on the brain and spinal cord. It's usually, but it's not always, modeled in mice, but the vast majority of the literature is in mice. And we, in our lab, and I could go spend at least an hour talking about these different models, but I'm going to talk about a model we use in our lab, in which the mice, they show relapses and remissions at first, but eventually some of these mice, though not all, will start to get chronically worse. And so describing the model is very briefly, is we use what's called a transgenic model. So these are the gene knockouts you might have heard of, or transgenic mice that you might have heard of in the popular news. And this specific mouse, it's engineered very specifically so that greater than 90% of all the cells in its body recognize a very specific protein in the brain and spinal cord. So normally it'd be like 1 in a million cells in this mouse would recognize the specific peptide, give or take, but this given antigen. But here these mice are rigged so that 90% of the cells recognize specific protein. And so now this is very powerful because we can take the cells out of these mice. Now, again, they're specific for this molecule called MOG3555, which is this protein found in the brain and spinal cord. We culture them in a dish, and we put on top of them, you'll recognize some of these from my previous slide, TGF-beta, IL-6, IL-23. These are these soluble proteins, these secreted proteins that can make a Th17 response. And then we put them, after 5 days of culture, we put them in a mice that we call non-skids. And so what we find is that some of these mice over the course of 2 to 3 months will get this progressive disease, but some do not. And this is exciting to us as biologists because now this can allow us to understand what are the specific differences that are causing these outcomes. So the specific question we had in our talk or in our work was does male sex, can that worsen Th17 mediated chronic progressive EAE or MS-like disease? So I just want to give a shout out to the people who did the work. So Pranitha Das, she's now a research professional at the Universitat of Sherbrooke. She was a PhD student in the lab. And Mohammed Umair, who helped them carry on the project and now is doing postdoctoral training at the University Health Network in Toronto, at the University of Toronto. And so what Pranitha did some years ago, she did a very simple thing. So she took the male T cells and she cultured them and put them in a male mice, or she took female T cells, cultured them, and put them in a female mice. And what she found initially that was kind of interesting was that the female mice got disease that was mildly severe over 70 days. But basically, the higher you are on the y-axis of this graph, the worse the disease is. She found that, however, a certain percentage of the male recipients of the male cells got very, very, very sick, but it wasn't all of them. And in fact, there were these two separate outcomes that could occur when you gave male Th17 cells to a mouse. Some would get very, very, very sick, and some wouldn't get any more sick than the females. So this is very interesting that that male T cells can cause this real divergence in outcome, and this is again exciting because now we can try and understand what causes this. So again, this breakdown was about 50-50. And so what we know from years of studying biological sex is that there are two things that can affect biological sex. There are the sex hormones that we all think about, things like estrogens, things like testosterone. We think about menopause, andropause, puberty. But another thing that's less understood and we often don't think about are sex chromosomes. So men are XX and males are XX and females are XY. I have that the right way around. Females are XX and males are XY. And this can have really important aspects on biology as well. And so what are the contributions of these two variables, the sex hormones or the sex chromosomes, to the differences we see in progressive EAE? So to do this, we use a mouse model called the 4-core genotypes mouse. And this is extremely complex. And so I've tried my best to kind of distill down the key points. And so it uses a trick, which is that there's one single gene in our bodies, in our genome, called SRY. It's on the Y chromosome, and it governs hormonal sex in mammals such as humans and mice. And so how it governs this is that if SRY is present, an organism will become a male. That's why an XY organism becomes a male. However, if SRY is absent, the organism becomes female, and that's why an XX organism is a female. It doesn't have a Y. It does not have SRY. But it goes to follow that in biology, we're able to really use cutting-edge techniques to manipulate the presence or the absence of genes in the genome of a mouse. And what we have found is that by manipulating expression of SRY in mice, we can essentially generate male mice that have two X chromosomes or female mice with an XY chromosome. And so I should point out, we obtained these mice. We did not generate them ourselves. They've been used in other studies, but we want to understand what they mean and what they might be doing in progressive MS. And so I won't go through the complex genetics here. I'm just going to show you that when we breed these mice, we have mice that are hormonally and chromosomally male on the left and hormonally and chromosomally female on the right. And when we breed them, we end up, for those of you who took biology maybe in university or what have you, you might remember this is called a Punnett square. Basically, what we have got here is hormonally male mice on the top, hormonally female mice on the bottom, and then the mice on the left are XY and the mice on the right are XX. And if you look at the top left, at least on my screen, I apologize if that's opposite, or sorry, the top right of my screen, it might be different for you, but as the mouse says TG XX, this is a mouse that is hormonally male. It has testes, but it has XX. But in the opposite corner, the mouse that says XYKO, this is a mouse that's hormonally female. It has ovaries, but has XY. So now we're able to tease apart the contributions of hormonal and chromosomal sex. And so Umair did a very heroic set of experiments that we're currently wrapping up for publication. So we took the T cells from these mice and we put them into all four of these large groups of mice and put them in our recipients to see what happened. And what I'm going to show you here is these are representative curves from mice that receive these different cells. And you can see first, these are just individual mice, representative mice, and you can see the waxing and waning of the disease, which is cool for us because this allows us to study relapsing and also progression. But what's the real takeaway from this is that the mice that got the most sick are the females with XY. that got T cells that are female, hormonally female with XY. But the mice that got the least sick are the ones that got T cells from mice that had testes but were XX. And so the disaggregation of sex hormones and sex chromosomes driving the opposites of what we see. And this is just shown here. The bigger the number here, the more sick the mice got. And what you can see is that XY chromosomes from a T cell will make the disease worse, but male hormones will make it better. And so what we're left with is the fact that male sex chromosomes worsen disease, worsen progression, but male hormones improve it. So what we want to understand is first the chromosomal effect. And so what we asked, can a phenomenon called as leaky X inactivation explain this effect? And I'm going to try and explain to you what that means. So this may be familiar. This is sort of high school biology. The idea is that females have 2 copies of every gene on their X chromosome because they have 2 X chromosomes. Males only have 1 X chromosome. So in the vast majority of cases, female cells will shut down 1 X chromosome completely. So the amount of each X gene is equal between males and females because females are only having 1 X in the end. They shut one down, and males only have 1 X. But this isn't perfect, and this system isn't perfect. And there's a significant number of X genes that in female cells can actually be expressed from both X chromosomes. And so the inference is that these genes, which are called quote-unquote X escapees, are actually being twice as many, give or take, expressed twice as much in females and in males. And so we asked, could some of these X genes be acting in females to cool off inflammation in XX cells? And could that explain why only having less of it in male cells makes their T17 cells more likely to cause progressive disease? And so to do this, we did use some advanced genetic techniques in collaboration with bioinformaticians, digital biologists, and we found indeed that there was a certain gene called JARED1C. After using this bioinformatics machine learning approach, AI approach, you can even say, to find that this one gene called JARED1C or KDM5C, it's on the X chromosome, and it was more highly expressed in female T cells in our model. And so we went on and we used what's called a knockdown. So we were able to take cells and use a virus that can take that gene away. And we did it in female cells. And you'll recall that female Th17 cells, they don't cause disease that's very, very severe, and that's in the blue. But when we get rid of this gene, it makes the disease much, much worse. And so this suggests to us that one of the things that's tamping down disease in female cells is this gene JARED1C. And we asked then in maybe people living with MS, are there differences between the sex? And so this is in collaboration with Craig Moore, my dear friend and collaborator at the Memorial University of Newfoundland. I was there recently, a few months ago visiting Craig. I got screeched in. It was a great trip, but I also had a chance to share some of its work. And what he found was that in collaboration with him, that JARED1C, this one gene in T cells, you can see it's lower in people living with MS. And when you compare women with MS to men with MS, again, in the men living with MS, there's less of this gene. And this could help in the future to explain some of the differences we see between men and women living with progressive MS. And so to shift gears just in the last few minutes that I have, how is it that male hormones might be improving disease? And so this is a work that's active. I don't have a full answer for you yet, but I'll show you what it is we're developing and understanding. So we're looking at sex hormone signaling. And you probably have heard of androgens. So these are male hormones. Testosterone is the key one, but all male androgens signal through one receptor called the androgen receptor, and estrogen receptor is the dominant sex hormone receptor in females. And so going back to those mice that are hormonally female, but either XX or XY, we saw the vast majority of these cells are actually positive, express the estrogen receptor. That's along the x-axis of this graph, and you can see greater than almost all of the cells express the estrogen receptor. Now, when we look at the hormonally male cells, we find, yes, they're still very high for estrogen receptor, but now you start to see expression of the androgen receptor. So you see the female hormone receptors on every cell, but you only see the male hormone receptor on the cells that are hormonally male. And so again, this is a reminder, these are the mice, these are the cells that cause less disease. Pathogenic, I kind of snuck in a science word. Pathogenicity is just a fancy way of saying causing disease. And you can see that's just the stats here. You can see more of the androgen receptor. And so this is work that's ongoing. We're hoping that the androgen receptor might be part of the clue. And so I'm going to end here by just presenting that you have these two very powerful male influences, the two Barbies here. On the one hand, the two Kens, sorry. So you got the sex chromosomes on the one side. XY chromosomes can increase the ability of Th17 cells to cause MS-like disease, and GERD1C might be one of the X genes that can cause this. And on the other hand, the sex hormones. So male hormones reduce the capacity of Th17 cells to cause MS-like disease, and non-pathogenic Th17 cells express the androgen receptor. And so we're going on to try and understand what are the downstream targets of GERD1C. This is a fancy way of saying what are the other genes that GERD1C itself can influence, and can these be targets that we can try and hit and eventually develop drugs for? And on the other hand, if we can promote androgen expression in T cells, male or female, can we reduce disease in mice and hopefully one day in humans? And so I'm going to end with just a couple of acknowledgments. This is just a view of the Chateau Frontenac for those of you who've ever visited Quebec City. So this is my team at the University of Laval. I talked about Praneeth Dumare, Retta, who helps us out with these projects, Joanie Barajan, who's an unsung hero in our lab. She's my research professional. She's involved in every part of the project. These are the AI experts, if you will, who've helped us with our work. These are some of our collaborators. I talked about the work from Craig, but we're really fortunate to have collaborators in the United States, United Kingdom, as well elsewhere in Toronto. Also, the research, these are the foundations that have supported the work. Really key here is the MS Society, or the Société Canadienne de la Sclérose en Plaques in French. And finally, I'll be happy to take some questions if you have any. Thanks for your attention.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Manu, for your informative presentation. That was fantastic. All right. So now we have a few minutes left for questions. Audience members can type theirs into the chat box and we'll cover as many as possible. Again, we ask that your questions be generally in nature and that everyone can benefit from the discussion. If your question is personal or specific to your own situation, we recommend following up directly with your healthcare team or our MS Knowledge network. It's perfect. I will pass this on to Terry to do the Q&A.
Thanks, Brent. Yeah, we got a lot of cool questions, a lot of good questions that I'd probably ask myself, to be honest with you. One question I'm going to ask, which I'm really interested in, I'm pretty sure Brent would be interested as well. What is something that you'd like Brent and I to share to our peer support group members from the point of view of an expert in men's health and MS?
Is this directed at me?
Oh, I'm so sorry. It's for Dr. Manu or Bonnie. Right. It's totally up to you guys. Okay.
You can go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I think I would say that having men, talk, open up, self-advocate for themselves with their physicians, and I think that would be is really such a key. And then for them to find resources. So I think that would be my suggestion.
So I'm not a clinician, though I'm privileged to work with some. So I would hesitate to really offer anything very concrete that's related to care. But the one thing I can say is that, as we know, men tend to be a little bit more affected by the progressive floor if you look at the numbers. And this is really a source of very intensive research. So I know it can be kind of discouraging right now in this point of view that relapse onset MS, we don't have a cure, but we have a lot of really promising therapies. I'm sure many of you have heard of them, such as the B cell depletions and what have you. But there's a lot of intense focus on this. And I think there is definitely, I'm very optimistic that in the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have some real breakthroughs. And even in the next few years, and not be surprised if we start to look maybe at even some of these newer drugs that people are on, and perhaps it might be having a bit of an effect that we don't fully understand. So I just want to assure you that researchers throughout Canada, thanks to the support of MS Canada and the donors, many of you I'm sure donate, and thank you very much. Through the help of you, people around the world, funding for basic research, which I really think, please advocate to your politicians, wherever you are and whatever party you support, to continue to fund this, because we won't come to a cure for MS or these other diseases without funding and basic research. So I think that's a message I'd like to send out. We are committed to finding a cure, even before that, some really effective treatments for people suffering or living with progressive MS.
I like that answer. Thank you so much. So I have another question, and it's kind of a follow-up to that what you answered. And again, Dr. Manu or Bonnie, please feel free to answer this. What would you suggest should be prioritized in care when a male is first diagnosed? Dr. Manu? Bonnie?
Bonnie, maybe just I'm a mouse doctor, so yeah.
Well, I think a priority should really be about education, that they find good sources of education and that they learn about the disease, learn about how to manage symptoms, how to learn about treatment and treatment options, and to try and really participate in their care and the decisions that affect them. That would be one. And then the other part would really be about healthy living and, diet, exercise, vitamin D, smoking cessation, and mental health. So those two things, which is probably everything.
Awesome. Thank you. Guys, I'm really sorry, but we've come to the end of our time for questions.
Perfect. Thank you again, Terry, and thank you to both Dr. Manu and Bonnie. Perfect. So as we wrap up today's broadcast, we want to remind you about how you can connect with the MS Knowledge Network, which is staffed by trained navigators who provide consistent, quality information and support. Connect by phone, email, or live chat through the MS Canada website. Navigators are available Monday to Friday, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time, and can provide assistance in both English and French.
We want you to be a part of the MS community and encourage you to get involved with our programs, services, events, government relations, and volunteer opportunities. Together, we can take action to create a future free of MS. To find out how you can take action, check out our website at mscanada.ca.
So here are a few ways that you can stay involved. The Men's National MS Group is a welcoming and confidential space for men who are 18 plus and are living with MS. It provides the opportunity to connect in a non-judgmental environment where your voice matters. To learn more or join our group, contact the MS Knowledge Network at 1-844-859-6789 or email msnavigators@mscanada.ca. You can participate in research. Dr. Ruth Ann Mary is launching a study on how genes, diversity, and life experiences affect MS in men. You can reach out to Dr. Mary's research team to explore being a part of this study by emailing msepidemiology@nshealth.ca or visit their website queensu.ca/IBIO2DIVMS. You can also make a donation. This year, Giving Tuesday occurs on December 2nd, and when you make an online donation that day, our website at mscanada.ca, your gift will be triple matched. Thanks to a generous group of anonymous donors. Your gift will fund 3 times world-class MS research, 3 times valuable community support programs, and 3 times life-changing advocacy initiatives. Don't miss this opportunity day to give support to MS Canada. Thanks, everyone.
Brent, you're awesome. If you have questions about any of our education activities, please reach out to the educational team by email education@mscanada.ca or visit our website. On behalf of MS Canada, we thank you for joining us today.